My name is Helena Blackbright, and we are still letting people in, but I'd like to welcome you to this webinar on adopting AI in organizations. And we're very happy to have you here, and we're very happy to have Rebecka Cedering Ångström here. She is going to share with us insights about research that she has done at Ericsson. She's a principal researcher at Ericsson's research lab, and they've done a huge study where they interviewed more than 2,500 decision makers globally on adopting AI and advanced analytics in their organizations. So this webinar today is done in collaboration between 4 organizations, and we are here representing RISE, the Research Institute of Sweden, huge research organization with researchers from a lot of different perspectives, AI being one of them, but also innovation management. And we have ISPIM, the International Society for Professional Innovation Management, in which I run a special interest group with focus on AI and innovation management. And we also have Automation Region. I think a large portion of the participants today comes from Automation Region's network. Automation Region is a Swedish Center of Excellence at the Mälardalen University, and not so surprisingly, perhaps if you listen to the name, the focus is on world-class automation solutions. And I work there together with the colleagues. Johan today is helping us with the technicalities and Zoom and all those things. And then we also have the Innovationsledarna, which is the Swedish national sister organization to ISPIM, in English, Innovation Managers. And Nina, who's joining us today, she's also running a Thematic group on AI and innovation management that they have recently started there. So together we come together and we said, because we believe very strongly that collaboration often beats competition, we say, well, all these organizations, all our members and their networks have a very strong interest and a very strong need to adopt AI in their organizations by different reasons. And we've known that even though there's tons of things written about how important AI is to adopt and to work with, it is sometimes challenging to actually do it. So we said, why don't we arrange a webinar? We asked Rebecka to join us and share her insights, and we invite all these networks. And it seems like there is a great interest in this topic because at the moment, I'm not sure how many people have entered, but when I looked last at how many people who had registered for the webinar, we were just about 200 people, I think 198. And a majority of you are from Sweden, but we have guests that are really doing an effort to be here because it's late night or early morning. And those furthest away are from Australia, staying up late to listen and participate. And we also have participants from Russia, I know, a couple of countries in Europe. I think among those I saw Spain at least, Switzerland, Germany, Finland. And we have also people on the other side of the time zone spectrum from both the US and Canada. So I'm very happy to have you all here. And today we will meet not only Rebecka, but also Ivo Kukavica, who's an innovation catalyst at Telia company. Johan Frisell, and I have you just before what I'm looking at. Johan Frisell, CTO and co-founder of a company called Trell Technologies. I will introduce you all a little bit better later on. And we have Nina, who I mentioned before, who helped me to arrange this webinar from both RISE and Innovationsledarna. So before leaving the room to you, Rebecka, I have a question for the participants. And I like to ask you, because I know this is something that you've looked at, what you think, you who are here today, in your opinion and your experience, what is the biggest challenge with AI adoption, if you can choose between technology, organization, people, and culture? And I think you will all have a poll now, and I hope that works. And while we're waiting, I would like to introduce you, Rebecka. So if I could have you here with me. And you are smiling, but I can't hear you. Yes, there
Hi.
you are. Hi.
Hi.
Rebecka and I are actually colleagues in a sense, because we are both members of a small group called Add AI. It's a think tank that we started together with 3 other colleagues in 2017. So we met several times. And but I think today, Rebecka, you are most here in terms of being the principal researcher from Ericsson's Consumer and Industry Lab, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I must mention, because this is such a cool place to work, because that part of Ericsson has a very ambitious research program where you, and I need to read on my note here, you annually cover interviews with over 100,000 individuals globally, which means that more than 14 countries are represented, and statistically, you are representing the views of 1.1 billion people every year in your research. That is
Yes.
so cool.
Yes, it is.
Can't be. You need to envy that, don't you? And in this, your focus is on how AI system impacts decision making in organizations, right? And
yes.
this is
In a
within the
sense.
context that you have done the study we will hear more about now.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think if we end the poll now, we have 50, we have numbers in brackets and numbers that is not in brackets. So we have 52% saying that people culture is what they think is the biggest challenge with AI adoption. Is that about the same experience as you have?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I think that these numbers are quite interesting, and it's in line with what I'm going to present.
Okay, we're looking forward so much. So the screen is now yours. I'm going to stop sharing if I can. Doesn't seem like that. This is weird. But if I figure out how I do that, you will have the screen in no time. Promise you. It has never happened to me before that I can't stop. Do we think that perhaps, there we are, stop sharing. So please, the screen is yours now.
Thank you. I'm trying to get rid of this poll that is popping up in my middle of my screen. Okay.
I don't know about the other people's in the room, but to me, you are a bit low. So to me, you could raise the mic a bit.
Yeah. Can you all see my screen? Or Helena, maybe I'm checking with you. You can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So before I start, I just want to comment on those numbers you were saying about the 100,000 people that we interview yearly. Yes, this is part of a consumer and industry lab, but as a large part of our research is focusing on consumers, these studies tend to involve a lot more people or respondents. The study I'm going to present to you now is in comparison rather small, though it's a large study. But I just want to start with this question. So when we're picturing the AI-driven organization, what are we thinking about then? What are you picturing? If you just take a second to think about the AI-driven organization, what is that? So my name is Rebecka Cedering Ångström. I'm a principal researcher at the Consumer and Industry Lab at Ericsson Research. And what we are picking up on, or why we did this study on AI, or adopting AI in organization, is because we read a lot in business magazine, in a lot of different consultancy firms. They are talking about the AI-driven organization, but they tend to always use these extreme cases as examples, the Amazons, the Netflix, the Spotifys of the world. And we started to realize, well, we have reached quite a lot further now. There must be a lot of other organizations are on this journey as well. And if you really want to understand, what is the best practice, what are the type of challenges that these organizations meet, and how do they overcome them, and how do they picture their own future, we should ask them and not look at, the big tech companies. So we set out to do this study, and today I will share some of the findings. But just first then, who did we talk to and why? So this is based on majority of the research that I'm doing looking in AI in organizations. But for this specific study, we started off with actually doing 16 qualitative interviews with decision makers in organizations that have reached quite far on adopting AI and advanced analytics. And we did these qualitative interviews in the UK and in Sweden, just asking them, what's going on? What are the type of challenges you meet? What are the strategies that you're taking in order to become AI driven? And based on their answers, what we did is then we put up this quantitative study targeting 5 markets. So it's the UK, US, Germany, India, and China. And we wanted to survey about 500 people in each market to get a good size of a good sample for the study. But in order to identify these people who we wanted to be part of organizations that are on the journey of becoming AI driven, that meaning that they have started to implement AI, we actually had to ask 10,000 people in order to just get these 2,500 or 2,525 people that are actually part of our study. And the fieldwork were done in September in 2020, so it's quite fresh data. And the report was published openly just a couple of weeks ago. Okay, so what did we find? Well, first of all, we really learned that adopting AI is a journey. It's not binary. It's not either you have AI or you don't. It's actually a journey that you're on, and it takes time to get on that journey. When we're asking our respondents, who all agree that they have AI and advanced analytics within their company, we could see that there were differences in their maturity. We had a large sample actually who we named AI leaders, because they say that they have AI and advanced analytics fully implemented within the organization. And then we have the AI followers who are kind of in the between. They are currently doing this implementation, and then we have the AI beginners who have just started on this journey. But it was not only how much they had AI and advanced analytics implemented, it also we noticed and we asked them questions about their different strategies for becoming AI driven. So we asked them about strategies, if they are working with best practice examples, or if they have executive sponsors, or if they have dedicated budgets for the different AI projects. And what we found out from, I think we tested 6 different types of strategies. And what we saw is that 30% of the AI leaders agreed to all of these statements, saying that they have all these statements in place, or these strategies in place. Whereas the AI beginners, I think it was 1/4 of them actually didn't have any of these type of strategies in place. So they are quite different in terms of maturity. We also saw that the AI leaders are quite more advanced when it comes to data strategy. They were more open to using external data, but also sharing data and using different type of data sets. Whereas the AI beginners were not, many of them were not at all into this. So we have 3 different groups, and now we're going to follow them a little bit. Well, the first insight that we have is really that the more you learn, the harder it gets. And we see that 99% of all our respondents have faced challenges with implementation of the AI and advanced analytics. But here's an interesting thought, because when we talk to organizations and doing qualitative interviews and discussions with organizations that may not have reached this far or started, there is often a misconception that people tend to think about, when we become an AI-driven company or when we're implementing AI, it's like having one big AI model, like a big Alexa or Siri or Skynet or something, that you have one big, that will sort and solve all these different kind of things. But what in fact is, when you're implementing AI, is this rather that you have many small cases or many small applications that are each solving a small or incremental little piece of its own. So one of the reasons why it's actually seems like it's becoming harder, as you can see, the AI leaders say that they have more percentages of their initiatives are facing challenges, is because the more of these type of different applications that you have, the more complex the ecosystem becomes, because all of these different applications, they draw from maybe the same data sets, but different data sets. And you have to make sure that you're talking about the architecture of this data. You're talking about the architecture, or you're managing the architecture of these different applications. You need to make sure that the processes don't overlap, or that there are conflicting decisions within these applications. So actually, the more of these type of applications that you add to the organization or start build on, the more complex the whole system becomes. Another reason why there also could be a sense of that the longer you're at it, the harder it gets, is also because some AI models or machine learnings, they tend to evolve, or they're not like software, where you actually build a software and then, you know, it stays the same until you're upgrading it. But with certain type of AI models, you actually have to work with lifecycle management. So you have to make sure, you know, they're staying on the right path. So you have to tend to them as long as they're up and running. This also makes it more complex when you're starting having more of these AI applications. But then, is it really about technology? And we asked that question, what is the major challenge? Is this really about only about the technology being more complex? Well, not really. We tested 3 different challenge areas for the AI and advanced analytics implementation. And what we saw from these 3 areas, it was technology, it was organization, and people and culture. And when we said organization, we're talking about organizational structures, budgets, these type of things. And when we talk about people and culture, it's more the behavior and the attitudes amongst employees. And when we asked our respondents, we saw that 91% have had challenges across all 3 categories. And when we asked them to rank the most critical ones, these are the ones that popped up. And as you can see, it's actually only 3 of the most critical challenges that are related to technology. The vast, or the majority of the challenges, the 6 out of 10, are related to people and culture. And this could, for instance, if you look at many employees prefer sticking to tried and tested routines, and employees are afraid of losing their jobs if their technology takes over. If you look at the different type of people and culture challenges, we see a lot of them are actually related to domain knowledge. And here we know that in order to build these type of AI applications, we need to have knowledge of both the technology, how the technology works. But if you want to implement it in your organization, you also need to understand the actual operation of the work, the business knowledge. You have to implement it. So the technology team often needs to collaborate together with the operational team in order to succeed on building successful models. But an interesting part here is and this I've seen also in some of my case studies, that if you go out to people and ask them about their domain knowledge and share that because you want to build an AI application that can ease the process or overtake the process even, there is a resistance to share this type of knowledge because you might be afraid that this will make you lose control over the process or even make you redundant. So there are a lot of people culture challenges within this field. Another one challenge that we saw, or that we heard a lot when we done the qualitative interview, this also related to people and culture, is actually that they're talking about a mind shift, that you have to move away from your type of way that you're viewing the business today, you know, being reactive. If there is alarm, I will react to that alarm. And rather, if you're working with an advanced analytics and doing this data analysis, you need to go into having a proactive view of it and see what you can learn from data if you're using, for instance, predictions. And making that mind shift is also quite troublesome because it really forces people to think in a way that they might not be used to today. So what type of strategies are then organizations taking in order to overcome these type of challenges? Well, not so surprisingly, a lot of the strategies, when we asked them to also rank the most critical strategies, they are of course related to the people and culture, as this is also one of the major sources for the issues. But if you see the top 4 ones of these strategies, they're all related to man-machine interactions. So the top 3 ones, they're about the workshops or training and learning or educating employees about AI. But the number 4 one, which is actually about technology, is about improving the usability of the tool. So what we saw in our study is that really bringing the technology and the users in the organizations together and make them understand each other in a sense, that is really important for overcoming these type of challenges. We also saw that handling data and make people aware of how to handle data is also a strategy that is needed to take. And in one interview I did with a bank, it's quite interesting. The person I was talking to, a CDO, she was quite stressing the point of teaching people to handle data. And she mentioned, you know, if you want to, you have to make employees understand that you can't misspell a name if you put it in a new system, because then you will have a distorted data set. You have to be very keen on making the details correct, because otherwise that is a problem for the data set later on. And just making people understand the importance of quality in data was a bit of a struggle to her. But that is also the strategy that is being taken in order to overcome it. I think that the blue one is also worth mentioning. The number 9 is on organization, is build cross-functional teams. And here again, this is perhaps relating to that, the need of having both the technology team and the operational team in order collaborating in order to identify and build these different types of AI applications, but also overcoming that, and then the challenge of sharing that knowledge with the technology team from the operational team. But so what then is this road? What are you embarking on if you are deciding to become an AI-driven organization, and how long will it take? What we saw in our study is that, in fact, especially when we're talking to AI beginners, you realize that taking that first step on this journey could be quite daunting, because what the AI beginner said to us, or 45%, is that this will take anything from 4 years to forever to become fully AI driven. And just imagining, you know, okay, now we're starting off a project that will lead us to never to be fully completed. That could be quite intimidating. But it's also interesting to understand that this is seen from a bit different perspective, but in the same line, also from the AI leaders, because even if they said that, you know, this year, that being 2020, but this year, 2020, we will have AI and advanced analytic fully implemented in an organization, and we will be AI driven. Even though a lot of them said that that was true, they are also in a much larger degree saying that, well, we will keep on investing in AI and advanced analytics, and we'll keep on building applications. And we will actually invest even broader than what we have done before. And this goes together, you know, with the sense that even if you are an AI leader, you're not finished when you have it fully implemented within the organization. In fact, what we might see is that this only is the start of the journey. The AI leaders are also saying that they will continue or actually work a lot more with cross teams and this kind of cross ideas over organization. Because if we're talking about making small AI applications that are maybe doing incremental, small changes, but advancing us forward, identifying these different type of AI applications will become even more crucial when you have that broader on a big scale. So the AI leaders are investing a lot more also in this. So what is type of journey, or what type of organization are you then ending up with? Well, it's not like we're starting off with one stable situation with one type of organization, and then when you are an AI-driven organization, you have this new stable situation. Rather, what we're seeing that is that the future AI-driven organization is a stable situation of constant change. When we're talking, especially to the AI leaders, they are picturing a future where you will have a continuous development of small AI applications, making incremental or smaller changes. But all of these different AI applications have the potential to change how we make or how we take decisions, our processes or our tasks, which then they're also seeing that in this AI-driven organization, we will have a continuous change of the work processes that we have. And this, of course, will also then lead to a continuous change or a more reoccurrent organizational shifts. So in a sense, if we have this AI machinery or this AI factory set up, and we are continuing developing these type of AI applications, we will have an organization that is continuously changing. And just in picturing that, working in such a flexible and changing organization, that will have implications for a lot of the things that we do. And we are going to discuss some of the questions or some of the aspects in this panel later today or after this presentation. But just to give you an idea of some of the things that we've been thinking about. So in this continuous transformation, what does it mean for an organization to be led by AI if you have all this AI being part of decision making? And what does it mean for competence development? And what does it mean for the industry verticals if we have a constant changing organization? But we might be discussing these questions, but I think we have also, Helena, you have prepared some really interesting questions for us for this panel. So with this, I'm ending my presentation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rebecka, so much. It's always so interesting to listen to you. And as I said, I've had the opportunity of discussing with you while you're doing this research. But having it this condensed is something extra. I'm very happy that you're here. Considering all the things that you've told us about, is there anything specific that caught your attention most, that you found more interesting than the others, that surprised you perhaps?
Well, I can share a little bit of a secret. I was quite surprised about this continuous change, but I thought, yeah, it's in line with what we found out. And I've done quite a few presentations since this report was out. And as long as I'm out talking to people who are out in working in the operational part of the organizational business part, they tend to be quite surprised also when I bring this up. It's where we're actually moving towards a continuously changing organization. But then I did a presentation to a manager for this kind of analytics team, and she loved the presentation. And she said, finally, someone is talking about what I've been trying to say, about it get harder the longer you're at it. But then came the end punch, saying, it's a continuous transformation. And she was like completely underwhelmed. She's like, yeah, so. And we started discussing, and of course to her, it was natural. She had been seeing this for quite some time. So I think that what's really surprising to me is that we can have this dividence in the organization where one part of the organization are really seeing this future and others are not. And we have to bridge this kind of difference between different departments of the organization if we want to move forward and bring the best out of the technology.
Yes, no, I think we've discussed this before, and I will not stay with it long, but this is also one of the things that interests me the most, because as I believe AI, one of the most interesting characteristics of it when it's used and applied is its ability to actually address complexity in real time. And when coming from an innovation management background, I think it's also interesting, and that in the beginning I did not hear in your presentation, but slowly over time I realized, okay, that in innovation we often talk about the incremental change, the constantly kind of changes that we almost not really notice, and then we have the radical shifts that requires two different types of management, managing the incremental ones that is part of everyday life and incorporated, and also managing the one that is more long-term and radical. And I wonder if there is a radical incremental side of this constant change here too. But let's leave that question hanging for the latter part of the webinar. Now I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel, and I would like to start with Johan. So if Johan could join us, I guess he's yes, here we have him. Hey Johan, nice to see you. You are in Åre, in the northern parts of Sweden, so you actually have snow. Yes. We envy you for that. You are the CTO and co-founder of a company called Trell Technologies, and if I got you right, as I perceive it, this is a software and computer science company, which to me seems to be a bit like a one-stop shop for organizations that wants to build a data-driven organization, especially if they're within energy and infrastructure. Do you agree with me on that one? Okay.
Yes, I do.
So also something that I enjoy very much of having you here is because you described yourself as rather AI optimistic. And I like that in every person, but especially in persons like you, because you have have a long experience of working with organizations in the AI adoption process. So that is a good sign for the future, I think. So welcome, Johan.
Thank you.
Thank you. We also like to see Ivo here. Ivo, please. Hi, Ivo. Nice to have you here. You have one of those really cool titles. You're an innovation catalyst at Telia company. How do you get a title like that? It's a beautiful one. Well, you don't have to answer. I just want to compliment you for it. For you who are not from Scandinavia, Norden, Telia is a Nordic telecompany, and it's the largest Swedish provider of telecommunication services and internet. And I read an interview with you before this meeting, and you described your job as to ensure that innovation is part of Telia's DNA. Do you see that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So we have here, Johan is to a large extent representing the provider of AI, and Ivo is the company that adopts and also the innovation manager. And finally, we have Nina with us. Nina, welcome. And you, like me, hold a PhD in innovation management. And you're working at the moment as a senior researcher at the Swedish Research Institutes of Sweden. And there you're coordinating a collaborative platform of sustainable future work. And it's also active in strategic initiatives on human-centric AI and digital ethics, right? Yes, and then you're also leading the Thematic group on AI and innovation management within Innovationsledarna. So welcome all of you. First, I'd like to ask you, if you, especially Johan and Ivo, if you look at what you've heard from Rebecka, is this in line with your own experiences? And what is the major takeaway? What is your thoughts when you hear Rebecka?
Yes, I would say it's in line with first of all, thank you for an interesting report, Rebecka. But yes, I would say it's in line with what we see. We meet a lot of AI beginners, or even lower grade of maturity. They might not even have started using AI. They just have the intent of using AI. And I believe I can recognize a lot of the critical challenges that they face here. And I also think that what has been discovered in this report or presented in this report can help us to guide them and help them to get started and help them overcome the first step of starting to use AI and adopt AI. So yes, especially, I mean, if you look at the critical challenges, number 3 was procurement of technology, which is quite interesting to me, since that is probably just an indication that they don't know what to use it for, rather, because if they would know the benefits, or if they would see a benefit using AI, they would probably think that the procurement, or the cost of the procurement at least, is not an issue, right? So a lot of these things helps us understand how we can help them start to adopt AI. So I think it's really interesting.
That's cool. And you, Ivo, do you also recognize yourself?
Absolutely, and thanks, Helena. I'm really happy to joining this topic. Like already mentioned, I'm part of a big organization, Nordic Baltic leader in telecommunications. So working across the organization on driving innovation. I have to admit, and I wasn't interviewed for the study, I have to say. I don't know if our company was, so it needs to be disclosed. But the fact is that it triggered a lot of thoughts in my head, and especially around the topics of challenges and the adoption strategies. And I could recognize our company and where we are a little behind. So telecommunication was not on the industry scale there. We could definitely consider ourselves as a tech company. But to be honest, even though I'm in the innovation domain and working across the company, we have definitely areas on the customer care side and specific on data insight areas where we do adopt and work a lot with AI. But on a broader scale, for the first time, a couple of weeks ago, we announced a new strategy. It was the first time it was mentioned as part of our transformation target to adopt AI and machine learning technologies for our transformation. So this is a great start for us, and I'm pretty sure this year we're going to make a lot of progress. And with the help of this report, we can learn a few things on how we can probably adopt faster.
Cool. We have a slight problem with your sound, I think, Vivo, but we can still hear you, and we appreciate having you here very much. One of the things that I thought about when you described or presented, Rebecka, was how you on several occasions came back to data strategy and what I consider to be, relating to data maturity and things like that. So I'd like to open to all of you. What is the relationship between data maturity and AI adoption? Which one comes first? What do you think?
I can try to start. I think it's hard. Of course, it's highly related. I mean, data is at core if you want to do some sort of AI, and I think it's also one of the key challenges, basically, for at least for the beginners. The beginners, if you look at the report, it also many of the more traditional companies in manufacturing, for instance, were AI beginners, and they also tend to have not data at core. They are not built with data in mind, whereas technology might be to some higher extent at least. So, and of course, that is they relate to each other. The better you are at sourcing data and understanding your data and have a transparency and quality in your data, the better possibilities you have to get started and adopt AI as well. And I think that's also a hurdle to come over, because many organizations, AI beginners, tend to solely look on data and okay, we need to gather all the data we have in the organization in order to get started, and it becomes such a hurdle to come over. So you don't even get started. You don't get started with the activities that actually creates value, right? AI is something that creates value out of data, whereas data in itself, it's not that much of a value if you don't use it for something. So yeah, they are highly related, I would say.
Yeah, and I know you, Nina, I saw Rebecka, she's nodding during the entire reply there. But you, Nina, you've been working quite a lot on AI maturity. And do you recognize any of the relation to AI maturity and data maturity in that work that you've done?
Yes, for sure. And we've also had a lot of conversations and collaboration with AI Sweden and their member companies. And there we can see really the same reflection that comes from Rebecka's study, that companies are becoming more aware that AI adoption is also a data issue, but it's not, a lot of the challenges are actually not necessarily connected to technology. So we are starting to build support system for companies for management teams to understand in a way how different aspects of organizations need to change and transform. Rebecka was talking about the mindset shift that is, for example, needed, and how in a way we have to work a lot with developing more innovative and open mindset, so that people will be more curious about new technology and rather see opportunities to augment themselves with AI and use it as a tool that can support them to do better their work and have, in a way, more fun work or more time for creative and strategic tasks, rather than a technology that will only replace them. So I think also the management needs to turn the narrative from AI logic that's only optimization driven towards AI that creates value, either for the end user or for the employees, so that they will motivate people to want to be more trusting in the technology, but also more curious to experiment with it.
Cool. And I'd like to, we have Ivo back here. And I would like to ask you, Rebecka, because I have as I said, I will not take so many questions from the audience, but I have a question from Sarah, who I know we mailed to each other beforehand, and she really wants to be here. She's one of the visitors from Australia, and she asks whether how much of the AI adoption was driven by customer needs. Do you have any idea about that, or what that's outside the scope of what you investigated?
We did not, as you know, making a questionnaire, you want to put in 1,000 questions.
Yes, please. And especially when you reach out to so many.
Yeah. So we did not talk about customer relations, though I can say it is in the qualitative interviews that we've done, we could see that actually, especially amongst the qualitative interviews that we did with companies that have reached quite far, they had to educate their customers in the value of what they're doing. So the relation between the organization and the customers is really important, either because the customers are asking for AI, but I think more importantly, because if you are implementing it, you might need to bring your customers on that journey to understand the value of what they're getting. And that might not be such an easy task at times.
Indeed. And I'm not sure whether Ivo is, I've seen you popping in and out of the meeting. Are you back with us?
Yes, I'm trying to sort out the sound problem.
Yes, and it seems like you had. So welcome
back.
Nice to have you here. No echo, no nothing.
Exactly. I connected on my phone instead. Sorry for that.
No worries. Have you been able to follow what we've been talking about?
Yes.
Yes. And you, as the adopting organization here, do you recognize what Rebecka is describing about the AI adoption driven by customers? Is that something that you address as well as Telia?
Absolutely. And I would even like to stretch it a bit further than just customers. I would like to sort of put it in the context of the way also we see innovation work, and that is how can we solve problems with AI? I think innovation development in general, or applying AI, is how do we solve problems, complex problems, and problems that requires a lot of understanding, data, and insight. And in the customer space, that's absolutely most vital for us, where we can bring new products and services, new offerings, personalization, and quality of service to complete new levels. But we also see the opportunity in our space, like I mentioned earlier, even though maybe the sound was a bit difficult, is we have already started to apply AI in some of the products on how we even monetize on our data. So we have a data insight business line as of today, and we use AI to improve the models on how we interpret, anonymize, and aggregate that data, and build new data models. And I think that's a vital component of our future, using also the data and AI for creating monetization opportunities.
This is so cool, and this leads me. I was about to say go to Johan with a question, but I need to give a question to you and Nina. And I wonder if we're talking about adopting AI in an organization, do you need to do that differently? Do you need to have a different adoption strategy when you want to build an ability not only to use AI, but actually to innovate with AI? What do you say?
Yeah, I would definitely say, I mean, Rebecka was making a very good point how we need to shift from reactive to proactive model when using AI and predictive tools. So in a way, you need to build this capacity across organization where employees are kind of through the help of AI tools sensing what's going on in the environment on the market and can predict what will happen or what kind of future needs might arise. So they can use AI to become smarter in a way in decision making, but also introducing new products or services, or even, as Rebecka said, new lines of business that might, in a way, transform organizations that become more AI driven. So I definitely think there is a huge opportunity to move, as I said before, from this optimization logic of using AI towards more use of AI to innovate the business. But of course, this demands big changes potentially in the business model of the company, how we work today, and humans are naturally resistant to change. So again, here we come back to those strategies that we need to develop to engage employees across the organization to be more curious and willing to experiment. So we have, for example, developed fun tools like, cards that help employees speculate about their future jobs with AI, or, building exhibitions of, future artifacts from the work, even writing pop songs about AI and the future of work, just to engage them and make them interesting. So I think there's a lot of work to do that.
Yeah, and this is Nina is creative in another way than I am, and I'm always slightly uncomfortable with that type of creativity involving those fun things. But something that is
Helena, may I just
yeah.
bring one of the questions from the chat from the audience? Yeah. I see a question to myself around, do we use AI managing innovation, even though that's part of the topic later on today. But from our perspective, I honestly have to admit that we don't use that to a large extent. I wish we did. I definitely see an opportunity where AI would help us to enhance our exploration, the way we do experimentation, more intelligently, more faster, better ways to find new opportunities for innovation, both in terms of growth and efficiencies. Looking with the external sources of information and internal sources of information, and to be able to validate quicker new ideas and new concepts. I definitely believe that's something we will be doing in the future, but to the moment, not that much.
Okay, thank you. That was from Catherine. Yes, Rebecka.
I just want to comment on what Nina and Eva were saying, but also bring up something that Johan said yesterday. We had a quick chat, or was it Friday? Anyhow, so I think that it goes quite hand in hand, the innovation part and also the knowledge and understanding and the maturity of AI. It goes quite hand in hand, as we see in a lot of the interviews and the case studies I've done previously. If you allow your employees to do like hackathons or being creative with AI, that also increases their knowledge about the technology and what you can do about it. And that can then be used to understand, other ideas and acceptance for ideas or new applications that are coming along. So you have to bring them along. And one thing that I picked up in a lot of the different interviews we did, and I think this is quite a good feeling, and I think it goes in line with what Nina said, it has to be fun. It has to be fun, because if you're in this, you're in it for a long run. You're going to work with this as 4 years to forever. It has to be fun along the way. So I think that that is really important. But start with the small cases. Start with what, where people might learn. And I think you were bringing up something similar when we talked, that you have to use cases.
And I like to go to you, Johan, because as Rebecka said, we discussed this beforehand. We met a couple of times to discuss what to discuss, and then we did discuss something totally different. But I looked at, like Nina today, the earlier, I think it was Nina, when the Swedish AI agenda was launched, and a guy called Anders, who's research manager at Paltarian, he stressed the need to, in Sweden, work with operationalization. And I think that was exactly what you, Johan, stressed the other day, because in your experience, you said a lot of the companies that is not the AI beginners actually, you need to help them to identify very concrete cases where AI could be seen as a tool rather than the goal. Could you help us explain that a bit further?
Yes, exactly. So I think for a lot of companies, AI is still the buzzword, right? They want to use it rather than finding the need to use it. And once that happens, they also get afraid because it's complicated. What might happen if we adopt AI and so on? So what we want to do, and a process that we have found, a tool that we have found really effective, is that, okay, what we should do is to look at challenges that we face. Might it be threats from the market? Might it be new costs in the production, or whatever it might be, and start looking at those and see what can AI and data help us with in this case. And once you do that, you find small concrete examples that creates value and helps the organization to grow. And AI becomes something positive and data becomes something positive. And once you start doing that and maybe release a small application, a small tool that can help the organization, or a new tool for your customers, you will also find new ways, because then the whole organization will look into that example and say, hey, AI have some possibilities there. We also have some ideas. Let's get started. We have this challenge. Can we use data and AI to solve that? So start with concrete examples that creates value, adds value for the organization, helps the organization to grow and have an effect, on a positive effect on the organization. That will, of course, we still have all these challenges that are described, right? People, organization, technology. There's a lot of hard stuff here, but I think as long as you have a motivation, that growth is a really good motivation for people as well. I think you can start to overcome those hurdles.
And I think also, just to add to that, coming back to AI agenda, that Sweden can maybe use AI as a kind of competitive advantage, taking a more responsible approach, an ethical approach to AI development, because the Swedish brand is already recognized by values such as equality and diversity, inclusion, or work-life balance, workers' needs, and things like that. So I think Swedish industry and public sector can really push and support European Union in that direction as well, to be the leaders in responsible AI development. And hopefully then the Swedish industry can reap the benefits of that if we are early adopters of responsible AI.
And today we have this international audience. I hope we all can drive that agenda, and that we can collaborate to become a little bit better in the future, all of us. And just when saying that, if anyone happens to be interested in discussions on AI ethics in relation to innovation management, I'd like to say that next Tuesday actually, so in a week exactly, we will hold a much more laid-back webinar discussion that I introduce. I'd like to invite you to. I'm sorry. Where we discuss with a guy called Larry Metzger. He's editor-in-chief of a journal called AI Ethics, and also professor at, I think, George Washington. He will come to join us in a discussion about whether AI ethics can tell us when not to innovate. I think that would be a very interesting discussion that I'd love to see. We have only 5 minutes left. I would like to ask you, because time is flying when you're having fun, what is the interesting things for the future? Very, very fast, each and one of you. What will you focus on next? Starting with you, Rebecka, what is on your agenda when it comes to AI?
Well, I have a man-machine interaction background, so I am quite curious of how we are going to collaborate with AI as AI becomes more of our colleagues, and how that will impact power structures, decision-making, all of that. So I want to continue on that journey. But then the world isn't, what do you say, oyster. There's so many things that you can study. So I'm looking forward to follow this development anyhow.
Yeah, we're looking forward to follow what you do. Johan, what is in your agenda for the future?
A lot. I think we will, since you still see all these AI beginners, I think we will continue to optimize our process to help them get started and create real world, concrete, value added applications based on AI and data. That's our focus right now. And I think we have a good momentum and we will just keep it up right now.
Okay, that's really cool. Nina, with 3 months left.
Yes, I think on one hand, it's about helping organizations on a more strategic level to have a more interdisciplinary and cross-functional approach when it comes to AI transformation. It's also about what Rebecka said, helping employees with exploration with AI possibilities and augmentation. And of course, for me also, as I mentioned, to drive this agenda for more responsible AI in the future, where when we go towards general AI, it's also interesting how the human AI relationship will start to transform. And how we will start to treat AI more as equals in a way. We see in these speculations about the future how, you know, people are so fascinated about how, you know, they could have AI buddies at work, you know, and they are starting to give them human qualities. And of course, the smarter AI becomes, the more it can personify, I mean, a lot of these complex cognitive skills, but also you know, develop emotional abilities or to recognize our emotions and so on. So it will be interesting to explore this future.
Nina, we have to work together, I think.
Yes, you do. And finally, so people can leave on time. Ivo, what is on your
Yes. Maybe not on my agenda, but definitely on my wish list. And then going back to the going back to the report, in my field, I'm working across Telia. Part of that is ways of working in the field of innovation, others, and I really like the strategy around the shadow projects. So that's definitely something I would push. How can we help teams, individuals to use AI as it's a comparison with the current way of working, and thereby showcase and prove the point that AI brings a lot of value for the business. So that's definitely on the wish list for the future.
Cool, thank you. So with 1 minute left, we're wrapping up here. I'm saying thank you to everyone, especially to you who've joined us in the panel.